Welcome to the Matrix. Today we're gonna begin a journey out of the land of real numbers and into the land of matrices. I'm going to give you a peek into a world where instead of working with individual real numbers, we're going to work with whole arrays of numbers all at once. We'll see that we can add, subtract, multiply, divide, even do algebra with matrices. But matrices have slightly different rules, and we need to figure out what those rules are. So before we get started, we need to lay the groundwork, and that's what we're going to do today. So in the previous sections of this chapter, we've been using matrices. We've been using something we called the augmented matrix to represent a system of linear equations. And that's one way to use matrices, but we can use matrices to represent other sorts of data. So let's take a look at example 1. In example 1, we're just basically given a table of information about the May output for Acrosonics loudspeakers. All right, so we have 4 different models produced at 3 different locations. And we're given the number of each type of model, each model of loudspeaker that's produced at each location. So we got this whole array of information. And the first thing we're asked is to write a 3x4 matrix to represent this information. All right. Now there's no there's not this is pretty straightforward. A matrix is just an array of numbers. It's just a rectangular array of numbers. And so all we're going to do is just basically take this table and just write it in a different way. We're just going to write it as a matrix. Now this 3x4 is important. There's a particular way of naming the dimensions of a matrix, and it's always rows by columns. Okay, so the number of rows by the number of columns. Okay, so that means this 3x4 matrix means we have 3 rows and 4 columns. Okay, and that's kind of the way this table is set up. So all we really need to do is copy down this information. Whoops, 320 is the first number, 280, 460, 280, and so on. And that's really all there is to it. We're just putting these numbers in a matrix. Now, it's always a good idea to keep in mind what we're representing and what these different rows and columns mean. So the columns represent the different models, A, B, C, and D, and the rows represent the locations. So this is location 1, location 2, and location 3. Okay. So there we have it. That's a 3x4 matrix that represents the information in that table. That's all there is to it. All right, what is the largest element in the matrix, and interpret what it means? All right, the largest element. I'm just going to look at, so we're using some vocabulary now. Element. Element is just an entry in this, it's just a number in the matrix. Okay, so the largest element will be the largest number in this matrix, and we can see, oh, it's 880. So the largest number in the matrix is 880. And then it's asking us to interpret what this means. Well, so based on how the matrix was constructed, this column, or this 880 is in row 3, which means it came from location 3, right? That's the number of produced at location 3. The column is the Model D loudspeakers. So this is just telling us that location 3 produced 880 units of Model D. All right, so the next question is asking us to find the sum of the entries in row 1. All right, well, let's do that. Let's just pull out the entries in row 1. So that's 320 plus 280 plus 460 plus 280. If I put that into my calculator, I got 1340. So 1,340. So interpret that. Well, that whole row corresponds to the loudspeakers produced in location 1, right? So the sum of all the elements in that row represents the total number of loudspeakers produced at location 1. All right, so let's take a look at the last question. Find the sum of the entries in column 4 and interpret the results. All right, well, column 4, we're just going to take all those numbers and add them up. 280 plus 0 plus 880. All right, and what do I get? I get 1,160. So, interpret those results. Well, column 4 represents the Model D loudspeakers at all the different locations. So this is just telling us that the total number of Model D speakers that were produced is 1,160 units in the month of May. All right, so that's it. That's all there is to that example. Just putting numbers into a matrix. So it's basically a table of numbers, and you just have to know what the rows and columns mean to be able to work with it and interpret it. All right, so that gives us a start on our groundwork. The next thing we need to do, we've got a bunch of vocabulary that we need to go through that we're going to be using. And so the next video, I'm just going to go through some of the vocabulary. So I'll meet you in the next video to talk about that.